Quetzalcoatl, the Feathered Serpent, Aztec Mythology. In the Aztec world, there's a god who is everywhere, in the wind that hits your face, in the breath in your lungs, in the idea that knowledge can be sacred, and even in the morning star rising before dawn. His name is Quetzalcoatl, the Feathered Serpent. But here's the twist. Quetzalcoatl isn't just a cool-looking mythological creature. He's a creator who risks the underworld to build humanity. He's a force that pushes the sun into motion. And he's part of a rivalry so intense it explains why the world is never fully stable. And by the end of this story, we'll also tackle one of the most repeated myths about the Aztecs, whether they truly believed a foreign conqueror was a returning god. So take a breath, because for Quetzalcoatl, breath itself is holy. Setting the stage, Aztec cosmos in 60 seconds. Before we follow Quetzalcoatl into the underworld and into legend, we need one key idea about Aztec mythology. Their universe isn't built like a straight line. It's built like a cycle. Worlds can be created and destroyed and created again. Time isn't just past to future. It's a repeating pattern, like seasons, like stars, like the turning of a great cosmic wheel. And gods, in this worldview, aren't only characters with personalities. They're also forces, powers, roles that can wear different masks, depending on what part of reality they're expressing. So when we talk about Quetzalcoatl, we're not just talking about one person. We're talking about a divine presence that can appear in different forms: creator, wind, priestly ideal, and celestial sign. And now that the stage is set, let's meet the Feathered Serpent. Who is Quetzalcoatl? The name Quetzalcoatl combines two powerful images: Quetzal, a brilliant, sacred bird known for shimmering green feathers, and Coatl, serpent. Feathers belong to the sky. Serpents belong to the earth. Put them together, and you get a symbol that unites opposites: above and below, spirit and matter, heaven and ground. Quetzalcoatl becomes associated with things that build civilization, not just raw power. He's linked to wind, breath, learning, craft, and sacred knowledge. And in many Aztec traditions, Quetzalcoatl is closely tied to a specific aspect: the wind god Tezcatlipoca, the moving air, the invisible force that makes life possible. You'll also see him connected to Venus, the morning star and evening star, because in Mesoamerican thought, celestial cycles weren't just astronomy. They were messages, patterns of divine order. So Quetzalcoatl isn't simply a feathered snake. He's the bridge between worlds: earth and sky, life and death, human and divine. And in one of his most famous myths, that bridge leads straight into the underworld. Stealing bones from the underworld. To understand Quetzalcoatl, you need to understand what creation means in Aztec mythology. Creation isn't clean. It isn't effortless. Creation is risky. It demands sacrifice. It requires movement through danger. In one major tradition, the world needs humans, but the materials for humanity are not lying around on the surface of the earth. They're in the land of the dead. So descends into Mictlan, the Aztec underworld ruled by Mictlan and Tezcatlipoca, lords of death. And here's the problem: the underworld doesn't like giving things back. Quetzalcoatl comes with purpose. He needs the ancient bones, remains from previous ages of the world, so that new humans can be formed. But the rulers of Mictlan don't just hand them over. They test him, trick him, demand impossible tasks. Depending on the telling, Quetzalcoatl must prove he can survive the dead place without becoming part of it. And in the end, he manages to seize the bones and flee. But then, right at the edge of escape, something happens. He stumbles, he falls, and the bones crack and break. And this matters, because in the mythic logic, the broken bones help explain why humans are not all the same, why we vary in size, strength, and form. Quetzalcoatl carries the bones back to the world of the living, but bones alone are not enough. They need life. So Quetzalcoatl does something that defines Mesoamerican creation myths. He offers blood. His own divine essence becomes the payment that animates the bones into human beings. So humanity is not created as a casual side project. Humanity is bought at cost. And that gives Quetzalcoatl a special status. Not only a god who rules, but a god who gives himself to make life possible. Masks of the gods. In a lot of modern storytelling, a character is one fixed person, one name, one look, one identity. But in Aztec religion, gods often work more like roles or aspects, like masks, that express different powers. So Quetzalcoatl can be spoken of as the Feathered Serpent, this grand symbol that unites sky and earth. But he can also appear specifically as Tezcatlipoca, the wind, when the story focuses on breath and motion. And he can be linked to Venus when the story focuses on cosmic cycles and signs in the heavens. It's not three separate gods the way a modern multiverse might do it. It's one sacred force, showing different faces depending on what part of reality people are trying to understand. Quetzalcoatl as wind, the breath that moves the sun. Now let's shift from the underworld to the sky. Because Quetzalcoatl isn't only a god who descends, he's also a god who moves. In his wind aspect, Quetzalcoatl is breath itself, the invisible power that touches everything and cannot be held. And in Aztec cosmology, even the sun needs help. In some traditions, the gods gather after a great sacrifice that brings the sun into existence, but the sun does not move. It hangs there, lifeless, like a lamp that refuses to swing into the sky. And it's Quetzalcoatl, wind Quetzalcoatl, who pushes it into motion. Think about what that implies. The sun is not guaranteed. Daylight is not automatic. Cosmic order takes effort. And the force that makes it happen is not a weapon or a war cry. It's wind, breath, movement. It's a divine reminder that what keeps a world alive isn't only strength. It's circulation, change, the push that prevents reality from freezing in place. Two creation philosophies. Here's something that can feel intense if you're used to myths where creation is just spoken into existence. In many Mesoamerican traditions, creation is an exchange. Life is valuable because it costs something. Quetzalcoatl steals bones from death and then gives blood to make them live. Other myths talk about gods offering themselves to keep the sun moving. The universe in this worldview runs on sacred reciprocity, almost like a spiritual economy. And that's why Quetzalcoatl's story hits so hard. He isn't a distant architect. He's a participant in the price of existence. Quetzalcoatl versus Tezcatlipoca, order versus chaos. If Quetzalcoatl represents breath, knowledge, creation, and sacred order, then it makes sense that he has a rival who embodies the opposite pressure. That rival is Tezcatlipoca, often associated with conflict, disruption, temptation, and the unsettling forces that destabilize human life. This is not a simple good god versus bad god story. It's closer to a cosmic tension, order versus instability, ideals versus desire, civilization versus the chaos that always creeps in. Quetzalcoatl builds. Tezcatlipoca tests. Quetzalcoatl pushes the sun into motion. Tezcatlipoca reminds everyone that motion can also mean collapse. And their rivalry becomes one of the mythic engines of the Aztec world, because it explains why a perfect age never stays perfect. Even a sacred ideal can be broken. Even a wise ruler can fall. Even a god can be trapped by a moment of weakness. And that brings us to the most dramatic, human-feeling Quetzalcoatl story of all. Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl and the Fall of Tula. In later traditions, especially those connected to the memory of the Toltecs, Quetzalcoatl becomes more than a god. He becomes a model of a ruler and priest. A figure often called Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl, a man so bound to the ideal of Quetzalcoatl that the boundary between deity and human legend starts to blur. In these stories, he rules in the city of Tula, a place imagined as disciplined and brilliant, a center of artistry, order, and sacred restraint. This Quetzalcoatl figure is associated with rules, sometimes even refusing certain extremes, emphasizing ritual purity, wisdom, and civilization. But then, Tezcatlipoca enters the story, not always as a god in the sky, but as a force of temptation that can walk right into a room. He brings deception. He brings a mirror. He brings a moment designed to shatter the image of perfection. In some versions, he tricks the ruler into seeing himself in a humiliating light, breaking his confidence, exposing vanity, or igniting shame. In others, he lures him into intoxication, into breaking sacred vows. And once the ideal breaks, it doesn't just crack quietly, it collapses publicly. The ruler who embodied sacred order becomes a figure of regret. And in the logic of myth, that failure isn't just personal, it's cosmic. So he leaves. He departs Tula in exile, traveling eastward. And his departure becomes one of the most haunting images in Aztec tradition. The sacred figure walking away from the city, carrying the weight of a broken ideal, and vanishing into legend. This is where the idea of Quetzalcoatl becomes more than a god story. It becomes a story about civilization itself, how it rises on discipline and meaning, and how it can be undone by temptation, pride, and human weakness. Symbol breakdown. Let's break down why Quetzalcoatl's symbol is still unforgettable. The serpent is earthbound, close to soil, caves, water, and the hidden places where life begins. The Quetzal feathers belong to the sky, light, color, height, and the realm of gods and stars. So the feathered serpent becomes a living bridge, matter and spirit, earth and heaven, instinct and wisdom. Add the wind aspect, breath, and Quetzalcoatl becomes the force that moves between those realms. And add Venus, the morning star, and he becomes a reminder that even the heavens move in cycles, rising, falling, returning. This isn't just a cool monster design. It's philosophy in the shape of a god. The returning god misconception. Now we need to talk about one of the most repeated claims about Aztec history, that when the Spanish arrived, the Aztecs believed the conqueror Hernán Cortés was Quetzalcoatl returning. This idea shows up a lot in popular retellings, but modern historians have heavily debated it. The short version is this. There's not strong evidence that the Aztec emperor simply looked at Cortés and said, "Ah yes, you are my god returned." Instead, the returning god story appears to have been shaped and amplified in later colonial accounts, stories written after conquest, when narratives could be used to explain, justify, or simplify what happened. And honestly, that makes sense. Real history is messy. Diplomacy, fear, misunderstanding, strategy, disease, alliances, and violence. But a story like "They Thought He Was a God" is clean, dramatic, and easy to retell. So here's the best way to hold it. Quetzalcoatl was a powerful sacred figure with traditions of departure and prophecy-like echoes in later stories, but the idea that the Aztecs straightforwardly mistook Cortés for him is not something we should treat as settled fact. Myths don't just live in ancient temples, they get rewritten when power changes hands. What Quetzalcoatl represents. So when you strip away the misunderstandings and focus confirmed mythic themes, what does Quetzalcoatl represent? He represents creation that costs something, life paid for through sacrifice. He represents breath and motion, the invisible force that keeps a world alive. He represents knowledge and sacred civilization, the idea that learning is not separate from spirituality. And he also represents something deeply human, the danger of the ideal. Because even the figure of Quetzalcoatl, whether god, symbol, or legendary ruler, carries the story of a fall, not because he's evil, but because perfection is fragile. That's what makes him timeless. He isn't only a god of power, he's a god of meaning. Breath of the world. So the next time you hear Feathered Serpent, don't just picture a mythical creature. Picture a creator who steals bones from death, a wind that pushes the sun into motion, a sacred ideal tested by temptation. And now I'm curious, what version of Quetzalcoatl feels most powerful to you? The underworld traveler, the sacred wind, or the fallen civilizer of legend? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into gods and myths from across the world, make sure to like, subscribe, and join me for the next story.